Few games can match the peaceful tranquility and relaxation that the Harvest Moon series has provided for the past 22 years. The first installment of the Harvest Moon series was released in Japan on August 9, 1996 for the Super Nintendo, and it was later released in North America June of 1997. It was relatively simple compared to what the franchise is now. Grow your crops, interact with townsfolk, scavenge for supplies, and help grow your farm to a successful level. It doesn't really have an end, you just live your life, similar to a game like Animal Crossing, or to compare to a modern day game, Stardew Valley. It's peaceful and it picked up fast with gamers. What followed after this release was a plethora of games in the series. You had Harvest Moon Game Boy in 1997, and you had 3 released in 1999 for 3 different consoles. Harvest Moon 64 for the Nintendo 64, Harvest Moon 2 for the Game Boy Color, and Harvest Moon Back to Nature for the PlayStation 1. Between 2000 and 2004, there were 6 games released in the series, and 2005 had 4 more, including my favorite in the series, Harvest Moon Magical Melody. This was around the time that I stopped playing all the new installments, but developers didn't stop there, with Island of Happiness, Tree of Tranquility, Sunshine Islands, Animal Parade, Grand Bazaar, Hero of Leaf Valley, and Tale of Two Towns all coming out between 2007 and 2010. I played a little bit of Animal Parade, but never really got into it. Needless to say, this franchise was pumping games out at a rate that made Call of Duty look like Final Fantasy. It was incredible, but many of these releases were simply female character versions of the original game, like A Wonderful Life and Another Wonderful Life. Still, it's incredible to think that in a span of 15 years, from 1996 to 2010, they released a whopping 24 games, if you count these special versions and Japanese-only titles, like Poem of Happiness, which is basically just an upgraded version of Magical Melody. And ironically, it was released before Magical Melody. So at this point, if you're a fan of Harvest Moon, you're probably pretty happy. A seemingly unlimited amount of titles to sink your teeth into, and surely things will only continue to get better, right? Well, not exactly. I haven't really talked about the developers of the series, so let's take a step back for a second. The first Harvest Moon game was published by a company known as Pack-In Video, which published other games such as Minesweeper and Super Solitaire. Yeah, they weren't exactly Nintendo, but they do receive credit for creating the original Harvest Moon game in August of 1996. And it was only 2 months later, in October, that this company then merged with a company known as Victor Entertainment to form the legendary Victor Interactive Software. And by legendary, I mean they have 2 big franchises to their name. One being the Harvest Moon series we've been talking about, and the other, Kyo Flying Squadron. Only the original game in the Flying Squadron series ever made its way to North America, and 2 out of the 4 games in the series are Japanese only. Needless to say, Victor Entertainment never really made a name for themselves outside of Japan. Between 1997 and 2001, the Harvest Moon series was developed primarily by Victor Interactive Software, but they weren't alone. From the very beginning of the series, Natsume has also been a major role in the publishing of these games, and for the first several games in the series, Natsume was the company that brought these games to America. Fun fact, Nintendo was actually the head publisher for Harvest Moon games in Europe for the first few Harvest Moon games as well. Victor Interactive Software isn't an extremely well-known company, but Natsume is, and any Harvest Moon fan out there has at least heard of or seen this company in the opening credits of the Harvest Moon games. From the Power Ranger games to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater to Pocky and Rocky, Natsume has an incredible track record of making good games beyond Harvest Moon. They were even the developers of several Harvest Moon spin-offs, including Frantic Farming, Rune Factory, and An Innocent Life. While Natsume stayed consistent throughout the series, Victor Interactive was about to undergo yet another business change when it was acquired by Marvelous Interactive in 2003, shortly after the release of Harvest Moon Save the Homeland. At this point, Marvelous Interactive gained the rights to the Story of Seasons series, which is the original name of the Harvest Moon franchise, for those that want to be technical, but the nomenclature here is important, but more on that in a second. Without going into too much detail, Marvelous and Natsume partnered and kicked major butt over the next few years, cranking out Harvest Moon after Harvest Moon. Fast forward to 2012 now, where Marvelous and Natsume released a game called Harvest Moon 3D: A New Beginning, an ironic name for what's about to unfold. This game received fairly positive reviews, and overall, this was your typical Harvest Moon game. It featured a fun multiplayer mode, a customizable village, and you could even date the player you're attempting to marry. Divorce is also a possibility in this game. This game also featured new animals like the yak, llama, and alpaca. That's how you know this game is for real. Needless to say, things were looking really good for the Harvest Moon franchise, 16 years down the road and still pumping out enjoyable games. And then, things took a very strange turn. A turn that would leave people confused for the next 6 years. Marvelous and Natsume split. Marvelous decided that they wanted to push their own brand as much as possible. See, what I haven't mentioned yet is a branch of Marvelous known as Xseed, which handles their Western localization projects. Since Marvelous handled much of the development of the Harvest Moon franchise for the past decade, they were more than capable of keeping the franchise going without needing Natsume. If anything, Natsume was the company destined to suffer. There was just one problem. Who exactly owns the rights to Harvest Moon? Well, as mentioned earlier, Marvelous owns the right to Story of Seasons, the Japanese game, since they acquired Victor Interactive, which was previously Pack & Video, the company that published the original Harvest Moon in Japan. Stay with me here. Natsume was the original company to publish the game in North America under the name Harvest Moon, and as a result, Natsume owns the trademark for the game in the West. It's a bit confusing, and I don't know if even I completely understand it, but Natsume essentially owns the Harvest Moon trademark, while Marvelous owns everything else. And neither company was ready to give up on this farming simulation adventure. In 2014, there were two different games released. One was called Story of Seasons, published by Marvelous in Japan, and later on by Exceed Games in North America. The other game released was called Harvest Moon: The Lost Valley, published in North America by Natsume. But wait a second, Story of Seasons is Harvest Moon, or at least was. Because of the split, Marvelous decided to continue publishing games with the name Story of Seasons, and to just use the name in their Western releases as well. Since Natsume still owns the rights to the Harvest Moon name, they decided to keep publishing games under that name in North America. So which one is the real Harvest Moon? Ironically, it's Story of Seasons. This game also received fairly positive reviews, with a 76 out of 100 on Metacritic. The game also sold over 100,000 copies in North America by July 2015, only 4 months after its initial release. Character models were similar to other games in the series, marriage is still an option, and overall, this game feels like an authentic Harvest Moon experience. So what about Harvest Moon: Lost Valley? Well, this game sounds authentic, with marriage, harvest sprites, and farming, but it doesn't feel authentic. Marriage choices were very limited, festivals weren't very fun and extremely dull, and it shows that Natsume really depended on Marvelous a lot more than Marvelous depended on Natsume. Reviews were not good either, with only a 46 on Metacritic. Now, to be fair, the next couple of Harvest Moon games from Natsume, which included Skytree Village and Seeds and Memories, did do slightly better, but they never got up to the standards of the original games. Now let's shift back to Marvelous and what they've been up to. Story of Seasons Trio of Towns released 2016 in Japan and 2017 everywhere else. A gorgeous game for the Nintendo 3DS, and this game includes part-time jobs, various personality types to choose from, and an overall easier friendship system. It could be a bit repetitive at times, but it's a solid game. After that though, silence. Story of Seasons itself hasn't done much. Marvelous has still been publishing games, and they actually have a few Switch games out, such as Daemon X Machina and Fate Extella. When the next Story of Seasons game will come out, nobody knows. Harvest Moon, on the other hand, there's actually a game that's come out rather recently, known as Harvest Moon: Light of Hope. This game's been promoted the same way, but once again, it didn't get met with favorable reviews. This game is plagued with cutscenes, weak soundtrack, and tedious gameplay. Natsume continues to push the Harvest Moon name, but as time goes on, it seems to be a lost cause. Light of Hope is out for the Nintendo Switch for those interested in trying it, but be warned, it's not like the Harvest Moon of old. Stardew Valley, on the other hand, incredible game, and it's gotten many people hooked into thinking that this is the future of Harvest Moon. With Marvelous focusing on other projects, and Natsume taking their fake Harvest Moon and shoving it into the dirt, it seems like the Harvest Moon name is dead. Gone are the days when these two companies worked together to push this franchise up. And that's all there is to it. The Harvest Moon games that you've seen recently are not in fact Harvest Moon at all, at least not the same team that's been developing it. You could almost say that they're a sort of westernized version of the franchise, since the Japanese developer Marvelous was the group that left the name behind. Story of Seasons, on the other hand, is the franchise that we used to call Harvest Moon. Unfortunately, Story of Seasons is a Japanese-centric series, and only time will tell when Marvelous has plans on a new Story of Seasons game. And when they do, those of us in North America will be the last to find out about it. Thanks everybody for watching, I hope you enjoyed. This was my first attempt at a video like this, so let me know what you thought and what games and topics you'd like to see me cover with the series.